Well, welcome to Convos on the Couch, where we get into the minds of great business leaders. I'm Tom Reardon. Today we're joined by Dennis Stark, CEO at Golden Cockerel, one of Australia's leading poultry businesses. Great story behind that business. Out at Mount Cotton, literally was a chicken farm producing eggs back in the early 1930s is where it started, which is phenomenal that it's still powering away today. And Dennis, looking into that story, chicken was a absolute delicacy back then. And I remember speaking to my uncles and my father-in-law more recently about that chickens were very rarely eaten in the home. It was the eggs that was where they got the money from. But really, I suppose, wanting to hear from you, mate, the story behind Golden Cockerel. Who are they? What do they do? And your take on it.
Yep. So Golden Cockerel, the history, officially formed in 1973. So a bit over 52 years old now, between two farming families. But as you mentioned before, the two farming families go back a long way. So the guys up on the Sunshine Coast, the Woodlands Group, they sort of 110 plus years up in Beerwah, so long history there, and sort of expanded all through the Sunshine Coast region, and still a very strong company today. The Benfer family, or the Darwalla Group, they started in Mount Cotton, still live around Mount Cotton, so a lot of history there. Both sort of fourth generation farming families.
Yeah, great. And it's close to 40% of the poultry in Queensland, isn't it?
Yeah, so if we look at the growth across the two families, it's about 50% of Queensland's consumption, and we at Golden Cockerel at Mount Cotton, we're supplying 37+% of the Queensland consumption. So it's
big numbers.
So it's a pretty important supply, and we take that seriously. But
yeah, right. And mate, let's hit the ground running. I suppose you've stepped into two major companies through huge periods of change and transition and transformation. What's the toughest call you've had to make as a leader? And I suppose what was on the line when you had to make those kind of calls? I'm sure there's ones that are even recent.
Yeah, probably the strongest one that comes to mind is the recent tropical cyclone Alfred. I remember driving to work on the Monday, getting a phone call saying, this thing's coming, and what does it mean? And we've got a high responsibility for animal welfare, so we can't sort of be halfway through a process and have chickens caught from farms and midstream, stop production due to a cyclone. So it was a real sort of tough process to go through of making the decisions around supply, what's right for our staff, what's right for the animals, what's right for the long-term success of the business. So, yeah, it's a really good learning experience. And what we did, we didn't end up running the Thursday or the Friday, and then the cyclone decided to delay itself. We lost power the Friday night. We spent all day in the factory Saturday working on getting power up and running with Energex, and then the major storm at Mount Cotton hit on the Saturday night. So we lost power again Saturday night. We didn't get power till Monday afternoon. Luckily, we didn't lose any chickens on farms. They've all got generators. Some of the farms lost power, but the birds kept growing.
Yeah.
And so we had some big birds to process. So it's a real tough process to go through, like a test of resilience, because you think we had power, then we lost power again on the Saturday night. You got processing, but the impact of the birds sort of kept going over the last couple of months.
Yeah.
So we're just at the back end of it now.
Yeah, it's probably not. Power outage is probably on your risk register, but it's cyclone hitting Mount Cotton's probably not on your on your risk register. I'm sure.
A lot of trees. A lot of our staff. There was Telstra was down as well. So we've got a business continuity plan, and we'll put that in place. But sending text messages where people can't receive them. But it sort of shows you the quality of people you have. Like, that's where good people stand up. We had people driving, 3 or 4 kilometres just to get reception to check if they got a text message to come in and help out. So we ended up giving like a dozen sort of Alfie Awards. We called them the Alfie Awards, sort of, like a little bit like Alan Langer terrorising the New South Wales opposition try line. But we gave away some Alfie Awards for the people who stood up when we needed them to be counted. So
right.
There was some positives out of it. It sort of highlights the culture. It's the sort of things that people do subconsciously that sort of highlights a culture, and we saw that with a lot of our good people stand up.
Yeah, you've been big on that culture. We've been working together for probably nearly a decade, from your Light and Easy days through to Golden Cockerel now, whether it be Australian citizens or bringing palm workers in from the Pacific to assist, but it's always been a big thing around that culture of the workers, making sure that they all feel like one company and one growing group, which has made it easy for our side as well.
Yeah, and the guys have come in the last 2 years, because when I started, we had 20% overtime. We were struggling to recruit, and then I reached out to yourself. But, it's really good to give back to some of that society, like the Fijians that we've had across, and they're really respectful and appreciate the opportunity, and our team love having them on board. There's a real positive vibe to the people we bring in, and that's what we try to do. Is it's about sort of showing respect and care for everybody through the business, and everyone makes a difference, whether it's the farming side all the way through the vertical, because we're vertically integrated. Any chink in the armour is a weakness, so it's trying to strengthen and protect the whole line of supply.
That roll-on effect must be interesting to deal with, mate. I suppose from your side, we've all made many wrong calls across our careers. Is there anything that sort of sticks out, and what did you do once you'd made that wrong call, I suppose?
Yeah, probably the one regret I have is in people management. I'm someone who likes to solve problems, but for me, really focusing in, you want to sort of know your strengths, but then understanding your weaknesses and how you overcome them. So for me, people management and conflict resolution, I probably, in hindsight, really need the strength around a good HR person. So in my sort of current role in the new transition at Cockerell, we've got a really good HR team, and I really rely on them for that professional sort of insight and direction. So if we have to make a tough call, we make the tough call, but we do it the right way with respect. But it's probably that's the people management. It's a couple of decisions that I have made in the past where I've gone, well, I probably would do that differently today. And doing that differently is understanding, getting the right people around that decision making. So, play to your strengths, but then if there is a weakness, get, over recruit or get the better person into that area where you've got a weakness.
Get the right skill set around you. Yeah, definitely. And mate, your leadership styles obviously evolved over the last couple of decades. How do you see it transforming to the next sector of your life?
I think evolution and leadership is it's a constant. Like for me, it's everything through my sort of careers have been about change and managing change and evolving as a person and learning. So as I mentioned earlier, I think what I've learned from leadership for myself is every leader's different. If they bring that authenticity to the role, they're honest and they play to their strengths, I think that can make a good leader. For me, leadership, the way I lead is leading by example. So getting into the detail if I have to, and then where there's an opportunity for someone better to take charge, making sure they're front and centre of those decisions, and then working with the group. So not trying to be someone different. Like I sort of care about everyone within the business. So the decisions we make is how do we best serve the staff, the customers, and the whole business, and not pretending to be someone different. So we've got some exciting stuff at Cockerell, so I'd love to be there for a few more years. But it's sort of, and as long as you can keep growing, as a person, as a leader, and you make a difference. Like if I think I can make a difference and a positive difference for the company, for the owners, for the staff, that's where I know I can sort of stay around. Yeah,
great. And you've mentioned to myself previously too to make sure you don't get ahead of yourself.
Yeah.
It's been a big driver for yourself in all the roles that you've been. So, is that one of your sort of, I suppose, mottos as you go through your work career, and then on past that, how do you assess when you do need to make a change and quickly change in the environment that you're in?
Yeah, it's navigating the unknown. So it's really making sure you get the right people around, get the right information, stripping away ego. Like if, as a leader, you've really got to be humble. I'm in the CEO Institute, and that's been a really good sounding board because as a CEO, you sort of struggle to find someone to talk to about certain things. When you're at a peer level, you've got those peers, but in the CEO role, it's a little bit different. So one of the learnings I got out of one of our presentations from another leader was how they recruit, and it sort of resonated with me because their focus was on, first and foremost, getting someone who's humble, someone who is honest, and then the third criteria is someone who's happy, and the last criteria is a high performer. So instead of having a high performer first and making excuses, it's about having the right person in the role in terms of fitting the culture, and in that it's about someone who's, so for me it resonated in humble and honest, and then the high performance is an important part, especially for a senior role. You really need that performance.
Yeah.
But before that, they need to tick a few boxes.
I agree 100%. One of our mottos here is no egos, and we don't have room for them. And I think there's plenty of people that we have had the opportunity to bring into the business, but I think the destruction that they would have done to other parts of the business would ensure, sure, they might be a high performer, but it would not outweigh the destruction they went through on the way due to egos and all the rest of it. So I think it's a good call out there on getting the right order in that recruitment process. That's for sure.
It really, hearing those sort of 4 criteria really resonated for me, and that's been one of my focus, especially moving to Cockerell, is in the recruitment phase, getting the right person. Even taking the time not to recruit. So we've had had really good stability in 2 years. Then I had 2 senior people leave, and being having the courage not to recruit the wrong person, and take on a bit more responsibility for the short term, for the greater good in the long term. That's another sort of key learning, is high, slow, take your time, get the right person.
Yeah, definitely.
It's because to get that high performer, but also to get the right fit within the leadership group or a management or any role, outweighs the short-term performance objectives.
Yeah, definitely. And mate, talking about performance, how do you, I suppose, rate success? Like, how do you gauge success?
For me, a lot of it's about a sense of achievement. So if I can think you're making a difference, or coming from engineering, it's about sort of a project mindset or achieving a goal. And interestingly enough, probably another learning for me in more recent times is really setting the right targets and the right, KPIs. So we've got, IT is a big part of any business, and recently we've sort of introduced Power BI, and we've got a daily dashboard, and it sort of highlights the key metrics of performance. So, and it gives people a sense of achievement. So, yeah, for me, it's really about achievement, and even for the team, they sort of talk about. Another thing I've learned is like satisfaction equals results minus expectations. So if we can track the results and we're clear about the expectations, and we can sort of overachieve, there's a sense of satisfaction, and really setting those right targets or the expectations is key.
Yeah.
And coming back to them. So it's really about having the right metric that we can keep coming back to, keep talking about. And that metric can't just be like a specific, it can't be any random number. It's got to relate to the purpose or the core of the business. Yeah.
And mate, to get rid of, I suppose, the corporate fluff, and how do you gauge getting the results and the noise that goes around that? Really, sort of, there's a lot of noise, but how do you slim your way through that and go, right, this is how we're getting the results? I had a great man once told me that doesn't matter how much activity you do, it's all about getting results. But then you look on the other side, if you know someone's actually doing the work, and they're doing it correctly, they're going to get to that result eventually. So how do you, I suppose, get rid of all that noise and ensure that you're focused on results?
Yeah, it's a good one. I think you have to stay close to your people, like in terms of, having a pathway to all the people in the business, and depending on how you do that. But, the bigger the business, the harder it is, but you've got to have a pathway to all the people in the business.
Yeah.
And then having results that are meaningful, So at the end of the day, like, from a performance point of view, it has to have a financial outcome. So how does that KPI or result end up tying back to the performance of the business? And a lot of it's around the profit and loss. But it's really coming back to that core. So getting to the core of the issue, making sure there's a tie back, but then it's making sure that objective that does tie back to the financials is something that the person can have an influence on.
Yeah.
So we sort of track kilos per labour hour. So the supervisors on the floor can really see the difference they make on a day-to-day basis. It highlights the maintenance issues. And
having that one metric that everyone's aligned to.
Yep.
Yeah. And mate, hard truths, what do you think, some leaders out there, what are some hard truths that they need to hear, but, they don't necessarily like hearing?
I think when it's a good one. It's when things aren't going to plan. It's being honest and just resetting. So go back to the example of the cyclone. We had to you'd make a call and communicate it out, but you have to be ready to adapt. So
very quickly.
Very
So when
quickly.
you're losing power, then getting it back on, then losing.
The quicker you face up to the hard truth, the better. I think. Being willing to respond, and that's where that ego comes in, because I think if you're too worried about, the perception versus the reality, like getting to really stick into the reality, is it what's making a difference to the business, what's important, and then when you've gone down a certain path and things change, whether it's for us, it's about the farming, the birds are coming differently, or the market changes. The best laid plans, you've got to be able to adapt. Our business is dynamic. It changes every day. Like it changes because it's fresh consumption with short shelf life. We have to be willing to have an idea that's executed, and then something changes the next day, and you have to change course. So it's facing up to that, and accepting it for what it is, and moving forward.
Yeah, which probably leads me into my next question. What's an overused, I suppose, phrase in business that you hear it all the time, and you just roll your eyes and go, why are people so focused on something that's probably not going to actually get an outcome?
Yeah. It's if people go back to a policy or a we have to follow this process without being willing to check, to sense check it. Things are written for a reason, and there's needs for certain things, but you've got to come back to, what's important in the business, and understanding the intent of any policy or process, and being willing to challenge it, but making sure it's for the right reason. So, when people sort of, want to go back or want a new policy for stuff, we can just be overcome with paperwork, and we definitely need it for making sure we've got the right governance processes. Quality is a huge part of us. Food safety is non-negotiable, but just being willing to get to the core of something, and asking the right questions of the right people. Yeah,
we've touched on culture of the business, but also I suppose it's around you're in a heavy physical environment that you're working with people. You've got very strict guidelines. As you said, you've got growth rates with chickens. You need to move them through the process. We've been fortunate enough to work with you for a long time now. How do you manage that when you don't want to lose your culture, but people are tiring? They've not both physically, mentally tiring, but in the environments, in the manufacturing, it can be really tough to keep focused, I'd imagine. How do you manage that, I suppose, from your side?
Yeah, it's a tough one, because the chicken industry, we're a food supply. We've got a responsibility. It is low margins. At the end of the day, there's been long-term investment by the owners in the business, but at the end of the day, it's a tight business. There's a lot of manual work involved, and we've been grateful for the people we've had in the business. So it's celebrating the small successes. I'll go back to the cyclone again, but the additional weight we've had through the plan has resulted in a lot of overtime. It's good money for our people, and they want the money, but they don't want to have to do the overtime continuously. So it's really understanding their sort of main frustrations, showing empathy, and then doing some little things. We did the Elfie Awards, which were quite positive. We had to work public holidays because I think we had 4 public holidays in quick succession. Coles and
unbelievable, isn't it?
Our big retailers don't shut. The fast food places don't shut for very long, so we had to keep running, and we ran through a couple of public holidays. So doing a little thing like having a barbecue and a drink for all the staff who came in on those days, even though they're getting paid for it, and understanding why we opened, like why we ran, and I explained to all the staff that it doesn't make financial sense, but for the long-term relationships of our customers and keeping farming running, we had to process. So, making sure they understand why, and then just saying thank you through, we did a barbecue, we had all the managers, cooking up the sausages and chicken, just sausages and chicken on bread and onions with a bit of sauce and a soft drink, goes a long way. So it's the little things that count, I think, and that drives culture. Instead of, you have to pay people the right amount, but it's the little thank yous that can add up.
Yeah, and I think from memory, I was talking to some of our Palm Islander workers out there, and you give discounts on the chicken to the staff, and have big discount runs for everyone. So it keeps the money in their back pocket as well, which is pretty pretty good offering considering the volume of staff you've got working at those facilities.
Yeah, we have sort of circa 700 on site across the span of hours, and having a staff shop, we open twice a week. We put it through at cost price, and it goes a long way for a lot of families. Yeah, they're the sort of things that if we can do something like that, in my past life we did that with a lot of health checks and things that sort of the things we could do as a business to help people that they may not necessarily do for themselves. If you can do that, it goes a long way.
Yeah, definitely. You'd come across it a lot because with the technology changing in the manufacturing space, but that mindset of we've always done it this way, and having to change that mindset would be difficult. I suppose give us a bit of a yarn about that, because Light and Easy is a prime example of that, and then Golden Cockerel's gone through process change as well. But I'm sure the old school from 1933 would never have thought there's how it's turned out today.
Yeah. Well, when I first started at Light and Easy, my boss at the time, sort of said there was a bit of a culture of saying no to things, or we do it this way and we won't do it another way. But for me, that's a challenge. So as soon as someone says to me I can't do something, it's like it becomes like a personal
red rag to a bull.
Yeah, so I'll go out of my way to prove, and do it for the right reasons. But that's probably as you grow as someone and you reflect, it's doing it for the right reasons, but really being willing to challenge the status quo.
Yeah.
Because people change, society's constantly changing. Like it used to be whole chickens that people would buy. So it actually started out as whole birds. The Darwalla family started it. They're at the Big Wheel of Brisbane at South Bank. He was processing birds there and selling them hot. And then refrigeration came on board, and so it's constantly changing. There is only one guarantee. Things will change over time. So it's being willing to challenge the status quo, but keeping an eye on the future. So when you make a decision or any change, it's trying to think forward, project forward where it's going, so that small change is in the right direction, not in the wrong direction.
Yeah. And with fostering the right culture, how do you make sure that it's positive and people aren't just being busy for the sake of being busy in the environment that you're in?
It's for the sake of being busy would come back to that. For me, it's the operations dashboard that flows down to each department. So everything ties back to the financials, as I mentioned earlier. But the kilos per hour on a cut-up line, how that flows to the P&L, but then how the guys deliver that on the floor.
Yeah.
So measuring that daily, and then understanding when it deviates or what's wrong. Is it a maintenance issue? Is it a process? Is it a quality constraint? What are the core issues, and getting to that root cause? So, and investing in training. So one of the big things we've done is in the last couple of years we've engaged yourselves, but we've put on a graduate and apprentice program and full-time trainers. So we're sort of developing our own people. So from the floor all the way through, people can solve the problems and be part of making a difference to the KPIs through the business.
Yeah, great. And I think a majority of our Pacific Island workers are all on traineeships to upskill themselves to take those skills back to their own country as well, which is a positive when their 4 years finishes. It gives them some skill sets to take home, whether they become working in a kitchen, whether it's a butcher or just having some life skills in general that they haven't had before, which I think is really positive.
Well, when we first chatted I think it was late June of 2023 about the PALM scheme and having some dispensation for Mount Cotton, you talked about some of those success stories and people going back and starting their own business and applying those skills and taking their daily standard rate, which I think and then applying the hourly rate they get here in Australia is just transformative to their families, and that's where we give back. And we sold it to our staff. There wasn't any complaints from the permanent staff we have, because they saw the benefits for the business and reducing some of our overtime and our constraints, but the benefit it has for some of these people when they go back home after 4 years.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. I mean, I've visited some countries in the last year where the people with no jobs are living off $150 a quarter, and
Yep.
they're coming over here and they're sending a lot more than that back home every week.
Yeah.
So they're putting their family up into houses, they're putting their grandparents in houses, they're setting up little businesses. I think our workers alone in the Palm scheme sent between $40 and $50 million back into the Pacific last year. So it's a great scheme that and great to have large businesses and small businesses behind it, where we have some really high skill shortages at the moment. Hopefully we don't see any changes to the scheme, which I doubt we will with the new government coming in next week, because they're a very big supporter of it as well. And tough conversations, mate. I'm sure you've had many of them. I suppose what have you learned from those conversations?
Oh, the longer you put them off, the worse it is.
Yeah. No, that's
It's still a learning for me, personally and professionally.
Frank and honest and quick.
Yeah, trying to have the conversation early. So, as I mentioned earlier, I've got a good HR manager, and making sure when there's a bit of tension, really, addressing it early. If we can address it early, people are there to do a job. They want to do it to the best of ability. So, it's letting them succeed by getting in early. Yeah. I think it's best for everyone. Yeah. We've been doing that. I think it's been working well in the last couple of years. So, yeah,
that's right. And
that's where I played my weakness by getting the right person to have the conversation early.
No, that's a good idea. And mate, how do you differentiate yourself? Like you're in the chicken market.
Yeah.
A chicken's a chicken. How do you differentiate yourself from the competition that's in that place? I mean, you've got the legacy and that's gone with it from the days up in Beerwah or the days out in Mount Cotton. But what really sort of diversifies you from the others?
It's a bit like the leadership. You've got to play to your strengths and celebrate those. So I think for Golden Cockerel, we're proudly Queensland owned and farmed, so no one else can say that. The other guys are national or they're not in Queensland. So we can sort of celebrate who we are and drive that, being small and agile, so any of our customers can speak directly with myself, and so being really fast with fixing problems. We're a private business, we can make decisions quickly. So one of our fast food customers, they've done a lot of plant tours. You'd probably know them quite well, but very big in chicken. And, they express to us that, it's amazing every time they come to our plant, something's different, something's changed. He goes, the other guys, they talk about it, but nothing changes.
Yeah.
And every time they come through the factory, they sort of go, well, you've moved this, you've done that, and I think that's where you've got to play to your strength. Like for us, it's being agile, it's being small enough that we can make a decision and move on it.
Yeah.
And then because we I think we can get to the right answer a lot quicker, when there's less debate. So it's making sure we keep that agility in the business, even if we grow, because that's a point of differentiation.
Yeah.
So being close to our customers, we've got some really long-term relationships, and they're driven off long-term supply in high-quality supply. So really making sure we, through the cyclone, as soon as we're up and running, we really made sure we supplied those key customers.
Yep.
And communicating constantly. So that weekend of the 7th, 8th, 9th of March, we used the Teams meetings, but we had our business development managers talking to the retailers and the fast food guys, constantly all through the weekend, and they were some of the recipients of the Offie Awards. But so understanding who you are and making sure you do that really well. Yeah. I think that's the key to any good business is understanding, who you are, what's your purpose, and doing it well and doing it better than others. And we don't have to be as big as some of the other, the two big guys, but, we can be the best at what we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Let's hope that company you were talking about never gets rid of their chips and changes the style of them, because I'm addicted to those chips. But anyway, and mate, have you ever had anything completely flop? And from that, what made you back yourself to go and, I suppose, try it anyway?
Yeah.
Like you seem to be, any sort of business that we've had with you is you're persistent, you set yourself a goal and then you follow through on it. But have you had stuff flop or?
Oh, probably I think it's some things don't go to the original plan. We've got a recent one. We're upgrading some. It's a new project to reduce chemical usage and change one of the products we use in the plant. And it's a bit like saying someone's telling me no. If someone sort of thinks it's failing, it sort of gives me more motivation to make it succeed. So, yeah, when something's going astray, it's really, that's when you put the effort in. You get into the detail. You make sure you get the right people around it. So it's not giving up, I think, is a big part of it. The cyclone taught us that, the resilience, you can't afford to give up, because once you give up, that's when things will fail.
Yeah.
So if it's going astray, being willing to adapt, get the right people, get the right focus, and make sure everyone knows it's important. If everyone knows it's important to the business, the solution comes out.
Yep.
They talk about half the way of getting to a solution is writing down the problem. So when there is a problem, it's not shirking away from it, not ignoring it, not trying to change it, but getting to the core of the problem and getting the whole team around it.
Yeah.
So that's probably the closest example. So it's looking good at the moment. Yeah.
I'm sure it'll stay on that track. We touched on it earlier. Your chickens were predominantly for eggs, and you were lucky to have, if you're fortunate enough to be able to have a chicken roast every now and then. The changing food market, it's constantly changing. How do you sort of work out where it's going from your customer base, and how do you also make sure there's not just loud noise saying that this is where it's going, because everyone's on a bandwagon one way, but it's actually only 1% of the people making the noise, but they're trying to control 100% of the market. So how do you stay ahead of that?
There's a bit of sense checking, in anything, like any big decision or any big project or market trends. It's looking at it's stepping back and looking at it. So when times are tough, like at the moment, the chicken market's pretty competitive. There's been a sort of tough 12 months, and then the cyclone didn't help. But it's understanding the core business drivers, of the chicken industry. It's had growth, worldwide consumption for 50 plus years, and it's sort of continuing on a stable trajectory. We've got Southeast Asia, huge population there that is growing in wealth over time. So if we look at the macro trends or sense check that, the protein consumption increases with wealth.
Yeah.
And over the next 20 years, we'll see the wealth increase in Southeast Asia. We'll see protein increase. And chicken is got so many core benefits for that. It's everyone eats chicken. It's affordable. It's got really good environmental credentials. It goes with so many foods. Mm. So there's no sort of markers against chicken. We just try to fly under the radar a little bit as an industry. Yeah, so I think it's really, if you're making a call on something, it's just getting a sense check whether it's the right direction. Yeah. So not getting ahead of yourself and going down a path that doesn't have the right scaling or quantum. So it's just really, whether it's, as I said, whether it's a service and checking the scaling of something, it's making sure it makes sense from the ground up. The numbers add up, but then sense checking at a market level or a competition level, or for us, it's what's the worldwide market consumption going to be like? Is there opportunity not just in Australia, not just in Queensland, but internationally?
Yeah, and it's a cost base. I've got it to the point where it's a very cheap protein. Yeah. It doesn't matter wherever you are in the world. Like I was in Nusa Tenggara last week, which is halfway between Bali and Timor on a surfing and fishing trip, and every dish we had some type of chicken in it, which was unbelievable. The food was phenomenal, but the local village only had 50 people in it, yet they were able to supply the venue with chicken constantly for 7 days in. Another guest list comes in, so it's interesting how it's been managed. Am I just following up on that last conversation? So have you ever had to pivot quickly because the market sort of has completely thrown you a curveball or that you weren't expecting?
Yeah, there's another thing in the chicken industry called the bird flu or avian influenza. It's a real risk for it's a worldwide risk for the industry, but we've been lucky in Australia. We haven't had the bad variant, but last year there was an outbreak of a H7, which is a pathogenic variant, but it caused a massive issue in Victoria, but it had a flow-on effect where the border shut, immediately overnight. So we had to pivot from some of our export plans and adapt there. So I've got the confidence in the long term, but it's sort of being willing to face the hard facts and move and adapt. Yeah.
And mate, from I suppose a leadership perspective, what's one leadership myth that's absolute BS that you'd like to strike out that you've heard?
Probably the best thing for me, there's a lot of books out there. There's a lot of coaching and mentoring. I think every leader is different. And the one thing from the leadership myths is there's no right way. There's your way as a leader, and that will shine through. Do it your way. Be true to yourself, and understand yourself. The better you understand yourself and the people around you, the better a leader you'll be.
Yeah.
Do a lot of reading, take a lot of advice, but at the end of the day, you have to be your own person, and there is no one specific way.
Pick those bits.
I see you see some great people, but they're all different. It's celebrating who they are and what makes them different. Like yourself, you've got a uniqueness, but I think you stay pretty true to yourself, and that's why people follow you as a leader. So just keep it up. Yeah.
And mate, a golden nugget. What do you think that every leader should know?
Yeah, be willing to second guess yourself. Don't get ahead of yourself. You've got to make decisions, but they don't have to be made overnight. Don't let your ego get in the way. Make the right decision for the right reasons. Yeah, so just take time to let the seeds of doubt come in. Yeah. Just to let that flow through, so you get the right decision.
Yeah, it's a great tip. And mate, last but not least, give us a story. Give us a story where you went, holy hell, what was I thinking, or what was that person thinking, whether it be in an outdoor environment or an indoor environment or a workplace environment.
There's probably a few. I was started off engineering and then been in the food industry, so I'm still in the food industry. But back in 2010, I was consulting in and out of a suitcase in Victoria on one of the biggest sort of food builds we had sort of seen. And I'd been involved in the project for 2 years and sort of embedded in as a consultant, working for the builder, but embedded in the team of the customer, right? And we're out on site and it was a tough project and the superintendent for the client left, and then the project director for the client said, well, mate, you know what you're doing. We need you to step in and do that. And I said, well, I can't be the boss of my company. So I was like, yeah. So that was probably the time for me where, I could see that people respected the decisions I was making, that I needed to get back, sort of stop consulting and work directly in a company. And that's sort of when, after that, when the opportunity came up with Lite and Easy, where I could sort of make a direct difference, I took that opportunity and it was really good. I sort of had a really good time there and learnt a lot and grew a lot as a person and as a leader.
Yeah.
So, that's probably the one where I said, well, hang on.
Time to make an impact.
Hang on, I can't actually do that job.
Yeah. No, brilliant. Thanks for taking the time. Yep. It's been great. You've been the leader of some of Queensland's largest businesses and that have grown from strength to strength. And no doubt, I know you're just young in the seat for the last couple of years over there, but no doubt, the family are well looked after over there. So with you in charge, so really appreciate you taking the time and here's to the next chapter.
Thanks, mate.